You probably remember being told as a child that you should always respect your elders. This sentiment is understandable. There are, of course, always exceptions, and today we look at a few cases where elder definitely does not mean wiser. 7 missing backpackers' bodies were found between September 1992 and November 1993 on Australia's Belanglo State Forest. Ivan Milat, an Australian, was found guilty of their slayings and other counts in 1996. When Matthew Milat killed himself in 2010, he alluded to his great-uncle's atrocities. All of the victims were discovered lying face down, their arms tucked behind their backs and covered in leaves and branches. Nearly all had visible indications of sexual assault. Many had been viciously stabbed or shot, and one had been beheaded. During the police inquiry, the Milat family came to light. One of the 10 Milat brothers, Milat, also worked for the Roads and Traffic Authority, and others of the brothers had known criminal pasts. Wayne Petherick, an associate professor of criminology at Bond University in Australia, thinks Milat would have seen hitchhikers frequently because of his work. British traveler Paul Onions was hitchhiking in January 1990 when the motorist drew a gun on him. He took a flight to Sydney and recognized Ivan Milat as the attacker from years earlier. On May 22, 1994, police used warrants to search Milat's residence and discovered that Milat had saved camping equipment and other belongings from the deceased travelers. On July 27, 1996, Milat was convicted of all 7 murders, despite his denial of guilt for the killings. He was given an additional sentence for attacking Onions in addition to the 7 life sentences for the murders. Milat was transferred to a high-security prison at Goulburn as a result of an unsuccessful attempt to escape during his first year in prison. Ivan Milat never acknowledged committing any crimes despite being a suspect in other cases, such as the disappearance of 3 women in 1978 and 1979. According to criminologist and novelist Amanda Howard, who corresponded with Milat for years, he would have likely passed a lie detector test if he had. Milat started hunger strikes, ingesting staples and razor blades, and even severed his pinky finger to call attention to his appeal. His great-nephew, Matthew Milat, thought he was guilty, but his family members were divided on the matter. Milat changed his name to Matthew Milat in 2007 when he was 14 years old. Milat was his mother's maiden name. Milat was his stepfather's name. Matthew would boast about his great-uncle, despite the fact that he was still a young child at the time Milat was imprisoned. David Archuloni, another friend of Matthew Milat, 17, and Cohen's Klein, was invited to a party to celebrate his birthday. With a double-sided axe, Matthew tortured and killed Archuloni, while Klein captured the incident on his phone. "You know me. You know my family," Matthew said to a friend after the murder. "You are aware of the Milat surname. I followed their lead." Matthew received a 43-year prison term in 2012, of which 30 years must pass before he can apply for release. While he was incarcerated, Matthew penned poetry about his crime, one of which was titled, "Your Last Day." He was shocked and dismayed by his relative's crime after talking with Milat about his great-nephew. In May 2019, Ivan Milat received a terminal cancer diagnosis. The police attempted to coax him into confessing to the murders he was found guilty of as his sickness worsened. Milat insisted he was innocent up until the day he passed on October 27, 2019, at the age of 74. Milat's defiance, in Petherick's opinion, is consistent with his prior actions. Milat was an established narcissist and psychopath. All of them revolve around keeping power and manipulating people. He was aware that the police would attempt to persuade him to confess, and that if he did, he would have lost control, according to Petherick. Tamara Samsonova, a 68-year-old grandmother who carried out her crimes in St. Petersburg, beheaded, dismembered, and then consumed pieces of her victims. Tamara, who was dubbed the Granny Ripper and Baba Yaga by the Russian press, kept a diary that she kept in 3 languages: Russian, English, and German. In it, she described murder and cannibalism. Her victims' lungs were removed and she ate them, according to the diary entries. On April 25, 1947, Tamara Samsonova was born in the Russian city of Yusur, which is now part of the Krasnoyarsk Krai. She moved to Moscow and enrolled at the Moscow State Linguistics University after finishing high school. She relocated to St. Petersburg after receiving her degree, where she later married Alexei Samsonov. She and her husband moved into the freshly constructed panel house at number 4 on Dimitrov Street in 1971. He spent some time working at the Grand Hotel Europe for the Intourist Travel Agency in particular. Samsonova had accumulated 16 years of job experience by the time she was retired. Tamara's spouse vanished in 2000. She called the police, but further investigations turned up nothing. She turned to the authorities once more 15 years later, in April 2015, speaking with the Franzensky District's investigative unit in St. Petersburg and providing a statement regarding her husband's disappearance. Tamara's victims include her husband, who vanished and has never been recovered, as well as her neighbors and some of her previous renters. Tamara started leasing out a room in her apartment following the disappearance of her spouse. Investigators claim that on September 6, 2003, she killed her tenant after a fight. He was a Nautilus resident who was 44 years old. After that, she dismantled his body and dumped it outside. Tamara met Valentina Nikolovna Ulanova, a 79-year-old resident of Dimitrov Street, in March 2015. Ulanova consented when a friend of the two requested that she temporarily house Semenova while Tamara's flat underwent renovations. Tamara assisted with chores while residing in Ulanova's flat for several months. She grew fond of her flat and was adamant about staying put rather than leaving. The two's relationship worsened over time, and Ulanova eventually requested Tamara's leave. She truly did decide to poison Ulanova after yet another argument. On July 27, 2015, Tamara was apprehended after being caught on surveillance footage near her home, removing body parts of her most recent victim, Valentina Ulanova, and carrying a cooking pot containing her head. Tamara showed up for a hearing where she was accused of murdering Valentina Ulanova. Tamara traveled to Pushkin, where she was successful in convincing a chemist to sell her benzepam on a prescription. She bought an Oliver salad, one of Ulanova's favorites. When she got back to the city, added the tablets to it, and handed it to Ulanova. Tamara then proceeded to hack her up while she was still alive. In St. Petersburg, a pond contained her torso. During her court appearance, Tamara gave kisses to the media and told the judge, "I did it to be known as a serial killer. It's all planned out. For 10 years, I've been preparing for today. Due to my advanced age and lack of housing, I made the decision to enter prison. I'll die there, and the state will probably bury me. I feel such shame about it. I'm guilty and deserving of retribution." Tamara was remanded into detention while she waited to stand trial for 14 homicides. She was previously admitted to 3 psychiatric facilities and is said to have schizophrenia. She was made to undergo a forensic mental examination, and on November 26, 2015, the results showed that she posed a risk to both society and herself. As a result, she was committed to a specialized facility until the investigation was completed. Tamara was admitted to a specialized hospital in Kazan in December 2015 for psychiatric therapy that was required by law. Puente had a rough upbringing from the beginning. In January 1929, in Redlands, California, she was given the name Dorothy Gray. She was one of Jesse James's Grays and Trudy Gray's 7 children. They were both drinkers. Her father passed away from TB when she was only 8 years old. After losing custody of Puente and her brothers, her allegedly abusive mother passed away in a motorcycle accident when Puente was 10 years old. Puente spent her years after her mother's passing living with various relatives all around California. After meeting a 16-year-old Puente while working as a sex worker in Olympia, Washington in 1946, she subsequently established roots in Nevada with her husband, World War II veteran Fred McFowle. But by 1948, their union had broken down, and Puente had given up their 2 children for adoption. The couple went to Sacramento after her marriage to Axel Johansson in 1952, where she remained until her incarceration for murder. Their marriage was turbulent, with Johansson having Puente institutionalized in 1961. Despite Puente telling the magazine that they stayed in touch over the years, they got divorced in 1966. Roberto Puente, a Mexican immigrant who was her 3rd husband when they wed in 1968, primarily consented to the relationship in exchange for financial security and a green card. Pedro Angel Montelevo, her previous husband, abandoned her after only a week of marriage. When Puente first started stealing, she pretended to be boarding house residences' benefit checks and cashed them in her name. She was eventually discovered falsifying checks in 1978 and given 5 years probation, as well as a lifetime ban from operating a boarding house. While working as an in-home caregiver and stealing from her customers even though she was supposed to be helping them, Puente persisted in preying on the defenseless. In 1982, she was apprehended once more and found guilty of grand theft, forgery, and giving another person a prohibited substance. She received a schizophrenia diagnosis from a psychologist while serving 5 years for her sentence in California State Jail. She is to be considered dangerous, and her living environment and/or employment should be closely monitored. The psychologist said in a warning that Puente needed mental health therapy. Puente built an illegal boarding house after being released from prison, taking in unexpected victims. Puente drugged his victims, buried them in the backyard of the 2-story Victorian home, and then cashed their social security checks. Because authorities assumed the victims were still alive, the funds kept flowing in. In November 1988, while authorities were looking for a homeless transient with mental disabilities named Alvera Montoya, who had been reported missing, her murderous rampage came to an end. Eventually, 7 bodies were discovered on the boarding house grounds by police. Later, 2 more deaths were discovered, including the bones of Everton Gilmoth, Puente's ex-boyfriend, which were discovered in a box that had been thrown into a Sacramento river. Puente fled after the first death was discovered in her garden. Puente was detained in Los Angeles following the issue of a murder warrant and a search that covered California, Nevada, and Mexico. According to the site, Puente was unduly interested in the man's handicap checks when they first met in a pub, which is how the tip that led to Puente's detention came about. Puente's trial started in Monterey County in February 1993, after receiving substantial press in Sacramento. According to the Los Angeles Times, Puente's public defenders claimed that her victims died either naturally or by suicide rather than through murder. Puente was found guilty of 3 murders in 1993, while the jury deadlocked on 6 further murder charges. She was given 2 life sentences as well as a concurrent 15-year sentence to life. Puente was in touch with Shane Bugbee while incarcerated. Bugbee compiled a number of family recipes into the book, Cooking with a Serial Killer. The masked killer discussed her conviction and the victims in Bugbee's phone interviews, which are included in the book. She insisted none of them were murdered. Puente passed away in 2011 at the Central California Women's Facility in Chowchilla at the age of 82 from natural causes while incarcerated. Remember to stay curious, stay safe, and always keep an eye out for these unexpected things. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and keep watching.